Today we're going to be taking a closer look at the M1 helmets and seeing the different details, as well as talk about differences between the M1, M2, M1c and other variants of the M1 helmets used during the Second World War. So first we'll start with a front seam fixed bale M1 helmet, produced from July 1941 to October 1943. So here is my example of a front seam and fixed bale M1 helmet. So as you can see, it's not in the best of condition. However, the features are still noticeable. So if I take you for a closer look here, you can see the chin straps, the shell, the stainless steel rim, and it still retains most of its original paint. So the rim that goes around is made of stainless steel, and by now most of the paint has come off it. You can see the seam in the front of the helmet there, as well as the fixed chin strap loops welded on there and there. So this is the front seam fixed bale M1 helmet, and it might be hard to see with the chin straps on here. However, on the underside of the loops, there is a small punch dent that designates where to place the fixed bales. This was used by McCord, so that's how I know that this helmet was produced by McCord. However, it was also only used for the fixed bale helmets. Therefore, if you have a swivel bale one with one of these, it's most likely originally a fixed bale and was converted. There's the outside of the punch dent. Some helmets do have the dent on the outside, some don't. So there's a closer look at the front seam fixed bale M1 helmet. Usually the heat stamp would be situated on the inside here. However, in this helmet you can't really see it because, well, it has not aged that greatly. But at least it is intact. Now, moving on to the front seam swivel bale M1 helmet. So, this helmet here is a front seam swivel bale with the heat stamp 879C. This dates it to about April 1944. So, as you can see, this one has the stainless steel rim with a seam in the front there. Nothing in the back because it's front seam. It's been repainted, but you can see the paint coming off. This was repainted for the Korean War. Swivel bales are there, and you can see no punch dent on the rim of the helmet. Therefore, you can tell that it is a swivel bale one. And then you can also see the chin straps sewn on here. These are reproduction ones. Now, moving on to the latter type of M1 helmet shell is this one, the rear seam swivel bale M1 helmet. This is currently fitted with a net. However, you can just about see the seam is in the rear of the helmet. Now, an interesting feature to note is that this helmet, although it's a rear seam, has a stainless steel rim. Therefore, it's a very early rear seam. Again, this one's been painted over so many times, I can't really tell what the heat stamp is. It is missing one of its bales on this side, but you can see the swivel bale on the other side here. And obviously, post-war, the previous owner has cut a small notch in the front to make it look like a front seam. So removing the net will help you take a closer look at the helmet. You can see where one of the bales used to be. So it has a stainless steel rim. However, it is a rear seam helmet. And as I mentioned before, someone's cut a front seam in the front of it. But it's a nice example of a piece that you don't really find that often, with the stainless steel rim and a rear seam. So that's this helmet. And then now, moving on, there is a new type of helmet that we haven't covered before that is worth showing you. And this is the M2 helmet. So, what is the M2 helmet? It's not an M1, but it looks like an M1. Well, the M2 was the helmet designated for use by the paratroopers. So, the M2 helmet was designed as a helmet for use by the US Army paratroopers during the Second World War. Now, this helmet had some slight differences between the M1. Obviously, the name is one of them. Also, the shell and liners were slightly different. So, instead of the shell having the regular fixed bales like what the M1s would have had at the time, the shell had what was called a D bale, which is a semicircular bale or chin strap loop that allows the chin strap to move around freely to make it more comfortable for paratroopers to wear. These were all front seam and produced by McCord. So, with M2 helmets, a lot of the time the bales would have broken off. In this case, one of them has. And that is why a replacement bale has been created. There are different methods of doing this. There are some as re-welding the bales. Some included drilling a hole and putting the triangle loop from the mess tin to use the chin strap loop. My method is the use of wire to create my own loop. There are some other examples of that if you drill a hole in the side of the helmet. This one came from when the bales broke off. It just took a chunk of helmet with it. So there was a hole already there. So that is a repair method for M2 helmets if the bales do break off. The bales are welded on the same way as the fixed bale helmet, except they are a semicircular shape as opposed to the rectangular shape. Now, the chin strap also had a difference. Instead of being the regular infantry one that just sews onto the chin strap loop, the chin straps also had a difference. Instead of being the regular infantry chin strap that was sewn onto the loop, these chin straps had an extra bit of canvas that went around and clipped into the liner with a male snap stud. Now, I will show you the differences within the liner. So the liner obviously has these female studs on here for the stud to snap into from the chin strap, thus holding the liner together. It also featured a paratrooper chin cup and yoke straps that was sewn on, well, that were placed under the rivets of the helmet suspension. The sweatband has been adjusted slightly on my one. I've done that to make it more comfortable to wear. So that's the chin cup and the chin strap for the paratrooper helmets. So those are the main differences for the M2 helmet. Later on in the war, the M1c helmet was developed, and that was just a swivel bale helmet with the M2 liner and the M2 chin straps. So, I won't dive deep into the realms of paratrooper helmets. However, there's a really good book you can read about it, written by a guy called Michel Detrey, called American Paratrooper Helmets. You may have seen it. The cover is a picture of a 502nd helmet with a parachute first aid packet on the front. I'm not sure if it's still in print, but you can find copies of them around. So, the same with the M1 helmet liners. Paratrooper liners started off with the Hawley fiber liner. However, same problem, they disintegrated in the field. The US Army then had adjustment to the low pressure liner, for example, ones made by St. Clair. But the most common was the high pressure liner. Now, there were two companies that provided helmet liners for the US M2 paratrooper helmets. The first type was what's called the Inland type. These were made by the Inland Manufacturing Company. The main thing is you can see the stamp inside the crown of the liner is Inland. The main differences of the early Inland helmet is that the A yokes on the paratrooper helmet are OD3, and they have this metal wire buckle on there. Then later on in the war, Westinghouse took over making these paratrooper helmet liners. As you can see, mine is a Westinghouse with the small stamp in the center. I'm not sure how you can see that. Differences? Well, first run of the Westinghouse liners, almost identical. However, the second and third runs of the later type were slightly different. They featured OD7 A yokes and had a cast metal buckle as opposed to the wire buckle as seen by Inland. Some also had the later style chin cup, which wasn't leather, but a fabric chin cup with a sewn loop onto there. So that is the M2 helmet. Now, moving on to helmet liners. As I mentioned, the first type was what's called the Hawley liner, or the fibre liner. Now, I have an example of that here. These are very rare, and if I'm not wrong, let me just bring my numbers up. Hawley, they had 1 million liners produced, and then General Fibre also made liners of the same type. They made 100,000. So 1.1 million of the fibre liners were produced during the Second World War. So if you think in numbers, that's not that much. So they are quite rare, and also because they disintegrated, they are even harder to come across. So here's an example of what the Hawley liner looks like when worn with the standard M1 helmet shell. You can see it has quite a thick fabric around the outside, sticks out slightly, and has a different chin strap with this kind of buckle there. Now, this is not an original Hawley liner. I would love to own one, but they are really pricey and really hard to find in good condition. This is one I've made for reenacting out of a repro liner, and I've simply put fabric around the edge for it to look like a Hawley. I will make some adjustments to make it look more like one with different suspension inside. I will make some more modifications on the outside, but for now, when worn inside the helmet, it looks like a Hawley liner. So that's what the Hawley line looked like. There were 3 different types. The first type featured the early fixed type chin strap with this buckle and had silver rayon webbing on the inside. Second type had the OD3 webbing with the same fixed type chin strap buckle. And the third type, which was the latest type, had the regular liner chin strap as well as the OD3 webbing on the inside. So that's the Hawley liner. Low pressure liners, unfortunately, I don't have an example of, but they look similar to the high pressure liner, only slightly thinner, and the colour may be more of a greenish brown as opposed to the brown that these liners are made of. Then the third type, I have an example here. This is the original Westinghouse that was refurbished post-war to be a paratrooper liner. So that's it for helmet liners and different types of helmets. The difference between the M1 and M2 helmets. Not much else is different for the M2 and the M1. I've gone through the different modifications, but if you want to find out more about paratrooper helmets, then definitely buy a copy of Michel Letray's Paratrooper Helmets, American Paratrooper Helmets. It's a great book, and there's loads of information on there that I just can't cover in this video.
¡Dale,